First, you need to define a character group you want to follow. Then you need to define why you want to follow them. Define how this character group will end. All these steps are intended to create an attachment between the public and this character group. These characters will be the retranscription of your core themes. They will define your story's identity. They will allow this difficult exercise to be enjoyable while preserving its challenging nature, as you'll want to deliver the best story possible. On a daily basis, you'll need between 2 and 3 hours, 40 minutes a day to develop your organizations, 20 minutes a day to develop your environments, and about an hour to implement your choices in terms of character and atmosphere development through your chapters by retranscribing your themes. You intend to write a book in a week. If you intend to write about 100 to 150 pages a week, you are in for between 14 and 20 pages a day. The number looks high, but there's a clear progression to reach it. Start by writing for 1 to 2 hours and have a goal of 5 pages. Add another hour to reach 7 pages. Keep your 2 to 3 hours window to write 3 more pages. And then add a final hour to write 14 to 15 pages. Your goal is to reach 14 pages. Once you get this, you will be able to reach 20 or 25 pages in a day in no time. The easiest way to start is with short stories. We already have a guide on the types of short stories and how to implement them. Start with 5 pages and try to add an additional pages every month. Focus on the process. Rely on experimentation and the wish to experience diversity. What do you need to write your story? You'll need a group of characters, a setting, and the themes through which these will be expressed. How many characters do you need? 3 to 6 would be enough. If you're not sure how many exactly, you can average them around 4 characters. 4 roles, 4 functions, and 4 classes eventually. If you're not sure what roles and function are, check out the link in the description for a full article and a full video on the topic. The 4 kinds of role we'll recommend to beginner are rival, enticer, advisor, and protector. These 4 roles will generate the most synergy and most complementarity. The 4 kind of functions you'll want to use are the 4 classical ones: antagonist, protagonist, and 2 support characters to support both sides. When it comes to class, you can imagine them as the transcription, the visual transcription of your themes, which will be transcribed through quirks, accessories, and behavior. You can also make use of species to grant more diversity to your character group. You'll also express your themes through your environments. Same as for the characters, 3 to 6 environments should be enough to begin. There will be 3 main kinds of environments: the confrontation or play or game type, which is most suited to competition and conflicts; the rest and gathering type, which is most suited to pondering and reflection after a crisis; and finally the aftermath and separation type, which is most suited to, scenes of separation, scenes of conclusion, the end of an arc, for example, if you're writing a series. These environments will generally be a cafe or a restaurant, a house, an apartment, a basement, a main square, a city center, a town square, or an agora. None of these environments correspond directly to one of the aforementioned situations. But for example, you may want to use a city center to display a conflict. That's one of the uses. This space can be used for any of the aforementioned situation. Same for the house. A house can be a space of conflict, it can be a space of rest, it can be a space of celebration. The environment in itself is not affected to a definite function. For the sake of the rhythm in your story, be sure to alternate hostile environments and welcoming environments. If you're still unsure of what an environment is, what's the difference with a setting, for example, be sure to check the link in the description. Writing a book in a week needs not to be difficult. You'll only need to know how to improvise scenes. Now, how can you improvise scenes easily? You want to focus on one thing: escalation. As you'll want to go fast, focus on the issues. What's the problem? What's the problem for the collective? What's the problem in the situation? And what's the problem for each character? What are the stakes, again, for the collective, in the environment, and for each character? Finally, what are the possible outcomes? Think of each character's strengths and weaknesses. Think of their quirks, think of their skills. How can they solve the problem at best, at their level? What's the most efficient solution for each of them? Pick one and write it. If you want to know how to improvise a full scene, we got a full guide on that. Link in the description. When you know how to improvise scenes, you'll want to know how to improvise chapters. Same as for scenes, when you write a chapter, you'll want to focus on problems. You want to focus on issues. This will make your rhythm more consistent. As a starter, create 3 crises. 3 crises will appear in chapter 3, chapter 6, and chapter 9. These are the encore of your story. Establish the initial situation in terms of alignment. Who befriends who? Who's an enemy? Who's part of the same clan or same family? Then establish the final state of the situation. And how did the alignment shift? You can really simply start by writing the final line of your chapter, and then writing the first line of your chapter. It's the same thing as for the story, really. You know, you write the final chapter first, then you write the first chapter, and then you fill up. Focus on relationships. The public attached herself to the characters, and watching the characters' relationships evolve is the core of your story. If you only have 1 week, you want to focus on that, the effect of the problems, of the issues, of the crisis on the relationships, and how the characters cope. Now, what will your timeline look like? On day 1, plan the whole book. It shouldn't take you more than a half an hour. If you want to know how to plan a whole story in 30 minutes, check another link in the description. Day 1 won't be solely focused on planning the book. You may want to start to draw your characters and your environment in order to envision them more easily. In the early stages, you will prefer simple design. Then write chapter 1. Chapter 1 is generally shorter than the other chapters and will take you between 7 and 10 pages. Be sure to establish the atmosphere for the rest of the story. Finally, end day 1 with the plan of the rest of the chapters. Make use of the elements you've established in chapter 1 to create chapter 2 to 10. You can literally take the elements you've put in the first scene of chapter 1 to create chapter 2 to 4, for example. Scene 2, chapter 5 to 6. Scene 3, chapter 7 to 8, and so on. If it's your first book or your first couple of books, be clear. And don't be afraid to be less subtle than for your future achievements. On day 2 to 4, you'll want to write chapter 2 to 6. On the second day, write chapter 2 and 3 and draw the cover. Chapter 2 and 3 will be slightly longer than chapter 1. Try to make them 10 pages each. It should be enough to contain 3 to 4 scenes. On day 3, write chapter 4 and 5 and draw a new character. This new character is highly likely to be an antagonist, but you can turn her later into something else. Day 4 is mainly dedicated to chapter 6. Chapter 6 is the first main crisis. It's the central crisis of your book, so you want to spend more time on it. Not necessarily write more pages, but think it through more. On day 4, make also your first consistency check. You want to check the rhythm, the habits of your character, and the relationships. The final part of your timeline will be based around chapter 7 to 10. You also want to do some editing. On day 5, write chapter 7 and 8. Same as for the other intermediate chapters, limit them to 10 pages and draw a final character. This final character may be the true antagonist of your story, or a hidden antagonist. It can also be a hidden support. You choose. Day 6 will be dedicated mainly to chapter 9, which is the final crisis. Same as for chapter 6, spend more time on this one. And you also want to coherence check. If you're not sure what's the difference between coherence and consistency, check our video on coherence and consistency. You can also check our article, link in the description. Day 7 will be dedicated to end your book. Also, you want to make a final piece of editing. Since you have already checked the consistency and the coherence of your story, all that's left is to focus on orthograph, grammar, and semantic issues. Make sure you use the words you want to use.